Alright, so we're back. Welcome. I hope you got your snacks and are ready to go a little deeper into the Doomsday Iceberg. As always, this gets into some worrying stuff, so if you don't like the idea of the world ending, I'd strongly recommend you go watch something else. Just a heads up, there's going to be a few topics here that I'm skipping because they're either really and I have nothing to say about them, or they're just kind of really basic common sense, like impotence, or the food chain collapsing. And lastly, while I'm no expert in any of these fields, if a topic doesn't intrigue you, let me know, and if enough people show interest in that topic, I'll make a video on it, going into more detail. So with all that said, take a seat, get comfy, and I hope you enjoy our little ride as we dive a little deeper, and thank you so much for watching. So Grey Goo is a term first coined by Eric Drexler back in the 80s, and it's what would happen in the event humans lose control of nanotechnology, and it not only starts to self-replicate at an exponential rate, but it starts feeding on items necessary for life, such as water and plants, and eventually organic life itself. Now, nanotechnology isn't inherently a bad thing. There's a plausible upside to it, such as some people way smarter than myself think that in theory it can solve issues like the energy crisis, it can cure disease, help the environment, and somehow even bring back extinct animals, which I'm not sure how, but okay. And the big downside being, well, obviously it could potentially get out of control and consume everything, turning us all into nanobots. Now, the idea that seems scary and at all possible to you, there is a good side to this. We don't have the means to build technology this sophisticated at the moment, as well as many scientists who study the field believe that technology like this would have natural inhibitors to prevent overpopulation of itself. And in order for it to reach a catastrophic scale, humanity would have to be caught completely off guard, but we would more than likely be able to catch it pretty early and contain it. Plus, at least in my own opinion, I think an EMP would most likely stop nanotech from getting too far. Again, I'm not an expert though. Universal heat death is one of those topics that makes me feel stupid when I look into it because it has to do with like science and space and all that. But if I'm not mistaken, the idea behind it is it's based around the physics of thermodynamics, and since the universe is ever expanding, it will eventually expand and spread its internal heat to the point where we'll all even out with the cold reaches of space, and temperatures will balance out, causing everything in the universe to freeze. I know that sounds confusing, kind of, but thankfully one of the articles I read uses an example so dum-dums like me could understand. Think of it like adding boiling water to a bowl of cold soup. The two extreme temperatures would balance out and leave the broth to be lukewarm. So if this were to happen in the universe, the loss of temperature would be so severe that life as we know it would not be sustainable. And that's essentially the idea, but it's also dependent on the idea that everything in the universe is connected and dependent on one another in one thermodynamic system. And the good news of the possibility of this happening is, one, this is just a theory to a possible outcome with no real evidence to support it. And two, just like how the sun will eventually swallow the earth, it's going to take a real long time and won't be our problem. Hell, it probably won't even be a problem for the generation that has to deal with the sun swallowing the earth. So we got that going for us. Now, if universal heat death is the result of the universe spreading too thin, the big crunch would be the opposite and the universe recompressing on itself. The theory goes that one day the universe will stop expanding, and the gravitational force from the center of the universe, which is often believed to be a black hole, will start slowly pulling everything back in until it's all one singular ball of heat and mass. With some theories suggesting this is with some theories suggesting this would result in another Big Bang, and it's just the natural cycle of the universe. It's happened multiple times before, it'll happen multiple times later on. A lot of the scientists who think this will happen also believe in the closed universe idea, which is basically the idea that there is a border to the universe and it isn't ever expanding. So once we hit the border, that's when the crunch will begin. And just like the heat death, this is just a theory with no real evidence, and we probably won't live to see it. Keeping with the theme of shit the universe can do that we have no control over, where instead of freezing due to its size or going back in on itself, the big rip is when the universe gets to a point in size and something called dark energy, which is more or less just the empty void of space, becomes stronger than gravity, so it will literally rip things apart at a molecular level. And that's really it. I couldn't find much more on the theory aside from the basis of what will happen. Planetal Alignment's kind of a hard one to talk about because I couldn't really find anything on it other than the planets of our solar system will align with one another. And all of the research I did just kind of linked back to the Mayan calendar or Nibiru, but if I had to take a guess, the planets in our solar system align and bad things will happen. I don't know, maybe like a giant tsunami or something. If anyone knows, please feel free to elaborate, because I couldn't find anything. But Nibiru, on the other hand, holy cow, did I find a lot on that. Nibiru, which is often referred to as Planet X, is the hypothesized 10th planet in our solar system. Yes, 10th, we stand Pluto here. That has been theorized about, and according to one guy who's a self-proclaimed mystic, the ancient Sumerians knew about this planet all the way back then, which a lot of historical scholars dispute, but hey, to each their own. And while the idea of Nibiru is nothing new, astronomers actually found Pluto while looking for Nibiru itself, the collision theory itself didn't become a thing, or at least it didn't gain any traction until '95, when a woman named Nancy Liedler claimed she was in contact with the Zeta Reticuli star system through an implant in her brain. I'm not making any of this up, I swear. She never elaborated on how she was given the implant, but they did choose her to warn mankind that Nibiru would come flying through our inner solar system in the spring of 2003. Now, there are two big ideas as to what would have happened. One being Nibiru would fly right by us and its gravitational force would either pull the Earth out of its orbit into the sun, or it would throw off the Earth's magnetic fields and polarities, basically just flip the world on its head. And the other big theory with it would be that Nibiru was just going to crash into us, plain and simple, and it would have just destroyed the Earth. Now, there is a lot of circumstantial evidence to Nibiru's existence, but it's all really easily debunked by the simple fact of, if it's there, why haven't we seen it? We have a pretty decent comprehension of our solar system, so if it was there, we more than likely would have found it by now. To add on to that, one of the big theories during the Mayan calendar apocalypse was Nibiru would crash into us. With a lot of astronomers with very basic technology, just a simple telescope, were able to debunk this by saying, it's not there. The Andromeda galaxy collision, also known as the monster collision, is the idea that our galaxy and Andromeda, the closest galaxy to us, which also both happen to be the two largest galaxies in our little section of the universe, will merge together. Sometime between the next 4.5 and 10 billion years, based on the fact that both galaxies are moving through space and are on a collision course with one another. Nothing really went into detail about the bad stuff that would happen when this occurs, but you can make an educated guess that solar systems and planets would more than likely crash into each other, all new solar systems would form, a lot of planets would probably be consumed by black holes, and the like. This is one that's really based on personal interpretation of what you might, based on what you think would happen, with like simple, educated thoughts. And lastly today we have Qayama, which is the end of the world according to the Islamic faith. And this one is actually pretty interesting since I personally didn't know that Islam had a doomsday prophecy. And all this stuff is pretty wild, and I'm gonna butcher names and I apologize for that. often referred to as God's final days, it's believed Qayama will begin with many small events such as the Euphrates River drying up and gold being found in the riverbed, an increased ignorance in and the loss of Islamic science, and a war will begin between Islam and the Jewish, among a few other small things. After the smaller events take place, the larger ones will occur, including the arrival of Dajjal, who will be on the earth for 40 days, bringing a mass cloud of smoke that covers the planet, and while on earth, he will trick Muslims and lead them away from Islam. One of the next big signs is the sun will just rise in the west, and with it, the Dabat al-Arad will appear, and he is said to be a beast of the earth, who, unless I misinterpret it, will guide and lead the unjust in his name. Doing what exactly? I'm not sure. After the arrival of Dajjal and Dabat al-Arad, it is then believed that Jesus Christ will descend from the heavens, kill Dajjal, and lead all Christians to Islam. Afterwards, Jesus will rule the world under Sharia law. And for those of you who think the involvement of Jesus doesn't really make sense since this is an Islamic prophecy, Jesus is actually seen as a prophet in the Islamic faith. Not so much as the Son of God, but in a similar vein to Muhammad, just not making as significant of an impact. And after all is said and done, and Jesus has taken over the world with Sharia law, it is said that two groups will emerge, the Yaju and Maju, and they are said to spread across the world, causing mischief, destroying villages, and just wreaking general havoc. But it is also said that they will not appear until the barrier built by Dul Qarnian, I probably mispronounced that, is destroyed, which, according to some interpretations, the barrier is the Great Wall of China. Now, as for the probability of all this happening, I'd say it's about as high as any other religion-based doomsday. I mean, you'd probably be more inclined to believe this if you are Muslim, but if you aren't, you'd most likely be one of the ones that... But if you aren't, you'd most likely be one of the ones that are killed, so don't worry about it too much. Well, that got dark really quickly, I'd say. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. If I mispronounced anything, I'm sorry. Words are hard. Tell me what you thought, and if there are any topics you'd like me to go into more detail in, let me know. Typical plugs, subscribe, like button, things like that. I'm on Twitter. Check out some of my other stuff. If you haven't seen the first two parts of this, check those out. With all that being said, I hope you have a good day. Thank you for watching. I love you. Bye-bye.